Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to GNG LinkedIn Live, live show because we're streaming live from 3 different platforms. This is Gil and Gurpreet, and we are going to talk about today's topic is picked by Gil, which I think is a good topic to talk about. Zoomed out. Are you zoomed out? When we say Zoom, we mean like the video calls, the video conferences. With pandemic, a lot of companies switched over to Zoom or any type of video conferencing, Microsoft Meet, a Team Meetup, I think it's called, Team Meets, Google Hangouts, whatever system your company is using. I know a lot of us are always on video calls, so we wanted to talk about this. Who here is zoomed out? Just tell us in the comments. As always, it is Gil's topic. I'm going to let Gil lead the discussion today on zoomed out.
So thanks, Gurpreet, because this is an important topic, I think, because it has to do with people's physical and mental health. The first time I heard the idea of Zoom fatigue, and I read about it sometime, I think, in late April, which you got to give Zoom a lot of credit, is that they're basically like the Kleenex of video conferencing at this point. They're a brand name, but that's just what everybody calls video calls at this point.
Yeah.
So I mean, first of all, good on them for getting to that point. But the idea is that it taxes our brains to be on Zoom, or, as we are right now on StreamYard talking to each other.
Yeah.
Right? This is the kind of conversation that absolutely can contribute to Zoom fatigue, because the reality is that a Zoom conversation or a video conversation is really, really unnatural. It's not at all how we're used to having conversations. This is not how humans evolved. So the first thing that I discovered sometime in March that changed everything for me when it came to Zoom fatigue, and at least reduced it for me, is I took off self-view. Because
Sorry, what?
Self-view.
What does that mean?
That means that when I have Zoom conversations, I don't see myself as part of the conversation.
Oh, how do you do that?
We'll talk after.
Okay.
But it depends on if you're on speaker view or on gallery view. There's different ways to do it. If you do it on gallery view and click hide self view, then that actually takes you out of the video if you're recording. So there's ins and outs to it.
Okay.
But for me, and it wasn't a perfect solution because it didn't eliminate Zoom fatigue entirely, but it changed the game for me.
Okay, so how did it? Let's talk about this, because how did it? How did self-review, removing yourself from the video, not seeing yourself on the screen, how did that help you?
Because for me, I guess just part of my own psychology, I've always been a relatively self-conscious person.
Okay.
So I noticed, and I know I'm not the only one, because a lot of people said things to the same effect, that, when I was starting, just like everybody else, who were really being on Zoom all day, every day, in March, I found myself very distracted by my own view.
Okay.
And I found that also that it increases stress levels, because our brains aren't made to be so hyper aware of what we look like when we talk. I mean,
I hate watching my own recordings.
I hate watching my own recordings, and I can't speak for everybody, but I know I'm like a lot of people that I hate my own voice. So if you could imagine listening to your own voice while talking, it's a similar kind of thing. You're making yourself aware in a way that you don't need to be self-aware. It heightens the stress level, it heightens the tension level, and it reduces the comfort in the ability to really speak completely freely, right? Because you're always aware of that, and even right now on StreamYard, I haven't figured out how to get rid of it. So even right now,
people need to see you, Gil.
Well, I understand. Oh, I understand they need to see me. I'm just saying I don't need to see me. Because that brings us up another interesting topic when it comes to Zoom fatigue, is about the idea of being on camera. because some people
Comfortable.
are adamant that they're like, oh, you have to be on camera on Zoom or else it reduces everything. And some people are really, really uncomfortable on camera. And when you put them on camera, it takes away everything they had to say. They're just going to be shy. They're going to be uncertain, and they're going to be less likely to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be flexible about that. Whereas I like to see people's faces. As an extrovert, Zoom has been a savior for me because I do find the energy in it, but then it can go too far where, you know, the stress of looking at people staring at you is also the other aspect. Because even once you turn off self view, Zoom is really just a person staring at you constantly. Whereas that's again not, or a bunch of people staring at you constantly, which again is not exactly the norm. It's not how we're comfortable speaking. It's not how we're comfortable thinking. So it sets us off. So what are your experiences? What have you gone through?
It's funny because so my business always a lot of it's been virtual, but so I have two sides of businesses and business models, B2B and B2C. My B2C has always been video for the past 2 years, but meaning it was video slash phone call. My B2C, I didn't do videos. I didn't. Like it was, we are a virtual based company, remote based, but when we needed to speak with our clients and we needed to have like an hour long discussion or something, we used to go to the client's office. So now that's been taken out. Now that has been converted into videos. So I'm very comfortable now because I'm always on video. So I'm comfortable with the video. But what I noticed was because that what you brought up, the human touch was missing, but everything became all videos and online. I didn't notice this, but then eventually my head was hurting. And because depending on where you're sitting and when you're doing video calls, you have to be in a quiet space. I want to be in a quiet space so I can give the undivided attention. So then I invested money into lights and all that stuff, right? I just recently bought new lights, which I was telling you, I'm going to show you afterwards. But the one I bought before was like, right on you, and that light staring at you, I started hurting my eyes, it started hurting my head. So I did go through this fatigue moment, which I didn't realize that's what it was when me and you actually talked about this in April. And then I was like, yeah, because I was always on videos, always doing calls on videos and stuff like that. Now I can honestly say I'm used to it. I actually enjoy it because for me anyways, I don't know how other people feel, but for me, I feel like because I've always been virtual, for me, it's like still talking to people, being able to meet people without meeting them in person. She's still covering. It's not the same, but I like the fact that I've met so many great people during this pandemic where I've done videos like yourself, me and you. I've never met, but it's nice to look forward to the meeting one day when this pandemic is over. But yes, I can say now I'm okay. Like I don't feel stressed out. I'm not fatigued. I actually look forward to my calls just to see another face other than the 3 people in my house, other than me, my mom and my brother and my 2 dogs. So it's kind of nice. It's nice. For me, it's nice. I don't mind it. But yeah, if I had to constantly be in video calls, like back and back and back, I think it could get a little bit tiring.
Well, that's my question for you, and my question for all of the viewers then is, how many hours a week would you say you've averaged, say, since the beginning of June? How many hours a week would you say you've averaged on video calls?
Okay, so my coaching is always on video, so I've always been doing video. That's easily 2, 2, 3, 6 hours right there for the bootcamp program I run. August, I think I was doing a lot because I had 2 other batches. I was running 3 coaching batches. So I was doing
an hour a week with me. Don't forget an hour a week on this show too.
oh yeah, I'm not even counting these lives. Actually,
they count
oh my
too.
God, I'm not counting my lives. Lives I've been doing with you twice. Sometimes I do the Q&As randomly, and those end up being an hour and stuff. I was also last week. I was busy. I had 2 virtual workshops as a guest speaker. I was teaching, and those were 2-3 hours. I would say on average, on a normal day, a normal week, like a normal week where I'm not a guest speaker, I'm not like outside of my business, maybe 10 hours a week. But and then client calls, I always like to get the client on the phone so I can walk around. So I've learned to balance. I've learned that all my calls do not need to be on Zoom. And if they don't need to, I'd rather be on the phone. So yes, in the beginning it was like, oh, let's get on Zoom, right? Like it seemed like the norm.
It was a new toy. It was a fun new toy for a lot of people.
And I've learned to move away. So now my client calls, I don't do them on Zoom unless it's for presenting something and we need to share notes or something. Then other than that, yeah, that's the one thing I've taken out is my B2C, my B2B. I'm not doing them video. I'm doing them on the phone unless there's something we need to, it's an important discussion, then maybe we'll go on Zoom, but been doing it. So I've learned to balance it out. I think if I had to give anybody advice out there, managers who are making it like Zoom, you got to think back to when you didn't have Zoom. What were we doing? You were doing conference calls. Give people the flexibility because see, the thing with Zoom is you get tied down. You get tied down and you have to be in front of a computer. But when it's a conference call, you're not tied down. Maybe someone, summer, like we're in a nice fall, it's hot today, like this whole week's gonna be great. Like it gives you an opportunity to walk. You're not tied down to the desk. So I think the best advice I can give out there to anybody listening to this is, I don't think you should make everything video. Ask your employees what they're comfortable with. And then you may want to balance it with, hey, do we really need to have a video or can we do conference calls? Because I remember one of my roles were, actually 2 of my roles, I reported into to my head of HR, but they were located in a different location. All of our calls used to be on the phone. Our weekly HR call with all the HR managers, with the head of HR, we had conference calls. I think people got, the trends. That's why I hate trends. I think when pandemic hit, Zoom became a trend. Video calls.
That's one factor, absolutely.
Remember when we were seeing all these people posting their Zoom snapshots, screenshots? Oh, look at us doing that, right? And now you don't see it.
Yeah. Because it's become a more normal, like things have normalized when it comes to that
and
a
I
little
think
bit.
It's also because people got zoomed out.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things is that when COVID first hit and a lot of people went remote, I think there was one aspect of it was a trend. It was an aspect for some people of connection, right? Because you've gone from being around people all day, you miss being around people all day, you're suddenly very lonely, or you're only seeing the same 1, 2, 3 people constantly. So there was an aspect of that. But I think there was another aspect of that was also unintentionally nefarious, which was around the fact that there are a lot of managers who don't trust their employees. And if they don't see their employees doing their work and don't see them, they don't trust that they're doing it. And there are a lot of managers that, and I've spoken to people who've experienced this, managers who would get them on Zoom and get them on Zoom regularly, sometimes for good reasons and sometimes for bad reasons. Because the thing is, if you remember back in March and April, there was 110,000 posts of tips for working remote. And
Yeah.
then there was another, and after that faded, there was another 110,000 posts on tips for managing remotely. And unfortunately, some of the advice was not worth the data it was used and sent with, because some of it was, well, people need to be checked in on now. Now check in on your people constantly. You need to have lots of calls, lots of calls. There's no such thing as over communication. And so people would have their team on hours a day of calls.
And how productive were these employees, right? Like no one.
Not at all.
Yeah, you can't be productive if you're if you're on calls all day long. When do you have time to do the work? But then you're also expected to do the work, right? And one thing that's happened with this pandemic and all these Zoom calls is people are actually working longer because of the amount of calls you're doing, right? So what has happened is people are actually working longer and they're more stressed out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the amount of stress in from a variety of areas. And then there was a recent study that said people are working 48 minutes a day longer. 48 minutes a day longer on average since the...
I feel like it's longer because the people I've talked to were saying they were pulling in like 10, 12 hours a day.
There are some, absolutely, there's some people, but on average, though, the increase was, at least according to one study, was 48 minutes. But the reality is that some people then can't get off of calls, because some people doing calls is doing the work, right? Because then there's salespeople who I know they're salespeople. So you're saying, 10, 12 hours a week of Zoom calls, and that's a fair bit. There's some salespeople who I know who are on Zoom calls 8 hours a day, right? And when you're getting into that, you're getting into eye strain, you're getting into the mental stress of being on. And because there's a difference of being on, so to speak, when you're on the phone versus on Zoom. Because on the phone, you don't have to get dressed up. You don't have to shave. You don't have to put on makeup. You don't have to do the lights. So you could walk around.
There's a little bit of an advantage for the video. It forces you to a little bit dress up. Well, I work from home, so I actually look forward to my lives and my videos because I can dress up. Otherwise, I'm going to be in track pants, right? So it's a little bit of a nice a change than to always be in your PJs and stuff. But what I forgot to mention was this week I've been on Zooms almost a lot because I'm also hiring for a few of my clients. But this is part of our service is we do all the interviews on Zoom and we record them for our clients. And then when we shortlist them, we only send the shortlist recordings to our clients. So like on average, maybe I'm 10 to 15 hours, but when there's additional work, like right now, I'm on Zoom probably all day.
Yeah, and there is a significant impact on the eye strain too. I know a lot of people. I know my wife just ordered these blue light reflecting glasses.
So
I don't know if they.
My glasses are like that. That's why I'm actually started to wear my glasses more. I was always wearing my glasses, but yeah, these glasses have the blue light shield.
Yeah. So, but I want to go back to the point you were saying though, that not everything needs to be a Zoom call. We can have just normal phone calls. For me, what I like to do is I like to leave it up to people. I like to leave the option to people, because you never know what another person's going through in a given week. Yeah. Because like you're saying, some weeks you have 30 plus hours on Zoom. So if you and I were going to have a call, I wouldn't want to put you on Zoom for another half hour. On the other hand, if you are having a slow week and you're looking for somebody to talk to and having that energy, then it would be all about the Zoom call, right? And it's all about the individual circumstance. So that's why I sort of often like to leave it up to the other person of, hey, where are you at? Do you need the human connection or do you need the eye stress reduction?
So I want to touch on mental health. You brought up mental health, and September is Suicide Prevention Month. I just learned someone committed suicide just in BC, a student. But talking about mental health, pandemic has created so much stress for people. These Zoom calls, are creating so much anxiety for some people. Getting ready, not getting ready, being on video. I don't want to turn my video on. And if you're forced to do it, if you're comfortable, like I'm used to it, so I don't care. I don't mind, right? But if you're forcing your employees to have it on, like I don't force. I like seeing people, so I tell them up to you. But it's nice to see your face, who I'm talking to. But if it's your colleague, you know how it look like. I think it's we don't realize, and it's something I've learned a long time ago, but more as I openly talked about, like when Rob, a connection on LinkedIn, talked about his suicide, which prompted me to talk about a couple of times where I had those thoughts. We just don't know what someone's going through. And I think as human beings, we need to be more mindful. It isn't about what you need as a boss or as a manager. It's about what your employees need at this moment. It's a tough time for everybody. And these Zoom calls probably have drained so many of us out. And I think the conversation should be around, well, do we really need to do Zoom calls? Do we really need to do them? Can we have conference calls like normal beings we used to have them before pandemic, right? No one ever thought of doing Zooms. It was always, hey, here's a bridge number, jump on the call, get on the conference call, right? To connect through everybody around the different provinces, states, countries, whatever. We used to get on a conference call. So I think keeping mental health in mind, September is Suicide Prevention Month, but we need to be mindful of we don't know how this is impacting people. We don't know the burden it's creating on people's lives, anxiety and stress, the strain on the eyes. Being in front of the computer is hard alone. Being on the video, the presentation, how you look. Hey, if you don't care how your employees look, then communicate that. Hey, we don't care if you're sitting in PJs.
Well, that actually was kind of my next point, that because the reality is that we don't always know what the other person's going through. And there are scenarios and there are cases where people are going through a tough time where they don't want to be on video. And there's some cases where it's their best moment of the day is getting to be on video with another human. But I want to highlight what you just said, though, about what people look like on camera and how they present themselves on camera in what we call, quote unquote, professional. Because one of the aspects, in my opinion, in terms of reducing that stress is not just necessarily reducing Zoom calls, but changing how we conduct them, changing our expectations. Because if we know a person has their two kids they're dealing with school at home, or they have, an elderly parent they're caring for, and this Zoom call is just 1/2 hour out of their day, don't necessarily expect a woman to put on makeup. Don't expect a guy to shave. Don't expect a person to need to dress like they're good.
See why though, right? Like why, if it's okay, we're live, so it's a different story. I want to look presentable. But if you are having a work call with your colleagues, then why do we care how our team looks like?
Because that's the paradigm that people come from. And I don't agree with it, but that's the paradigm that a lot of people believe, that if you're not dressed a certain way, if you're not looking a certain way, what they call, quote unquote, professional, then you're not ready for work. That is their belief. And I don't agree with them. And I think it also, it hurts people. But this is an area where it hurts people, because if you're expecting people to not just show up on Zoom calls, but to show up on a Zoom call for a lot of people is more than just sit down at the computer and turn it on. But it's setting up the lighting. It's making oneself look presentable. It's doing a wide variety of things that isn't necessarily natural as part of your day. So you're creating this whole pattern interrupt as part of your day just to have a call that either A, they don't need to look that nice for it. Because look, you and I know what each other looks like. If you and I were ever to have a,
I've never met you.
but if you and I were to have a Zoom call, just you and me, I wouldn't want there to be any pressure on you to have to look the way you and I try to look for this kind of call, because this is a show and we're trying to present it, ourselves a certain way. But if it's just you and me, why am I going to pressure you to have to do all of that?
Don't. When I have my team calls on Zoom,
and that's the leader you are. And that's the thing. That's the leader you are, because you care more about the brain they're bringing than the clothing they're wearing. But there are a lot of managers, a lot of people who come from this belief. I mean, I always laugh. Many years ago, my brother was in Australia and he was applying for a job. He was there for 6 months and he was applying for a job at a telemarketer. Just, the typical telemarketer that everybody hates, the worst job. And he couldn't get the job because he needed to have a suit. He's like, why do I need to be in a suit? We're sitting in an office calling people that they'll never see us. He's like, in the culture of that company was that to do this minimum wage telemarketing job, they needed to be dressed in suits. And if you think that idea is gone from people, it's not. There's companies and people that still think this way.
How we put all these things and we think this way and it has to be this way. Meanwhile, we're human beings. We all function differently. Who cares about suit or professional dressing if it's just your office? Like, if you're not meeting with the client, hey,
the client is different. I understand that. I understand dealing with a client is a different scenario.
And then who cares? Like, who cares? Why are we creating all this? What's the right word? Like, we're creating all these notions that it has to be this way, and if you don't fit this box, then you're not good, right?
That's where businesses come from. That's where businesses come from over the last 100 years. That's what we believe is professional.
But it's not, right? It's not. So, like, talking about professional, like when I do my coaching programs, I don't dress up. I don't. If last, like, I was already dressed up and then I'm going into the teaching, that's a different story. But my evening and my weekend sessions, I don't dress up. For my bootcamp program, the coaching program, that's a group program that I run in the evenings and weekends, I don't dress up. It's also for me to show them they don't need to dress up. I'm not dressed up. And if I am dressed up one day, it has nothing to do with professionalism. It's more maybe I'm going somewhere or I just came from somewhere. I think leaders also need to, again, it depends on your leader. If your leader is the one that's saying you have to dress up, then, a little bit creates that anxiety in people that they need to dress up. But if you as a leader can come with a t-shirt or wear PJs or sweatpants or whatever and show up on the video looking like a bum, not bum, but, just like not all
comfortable, just being comfortable.
Whatever is your thing, and it will help your team, your employees look at like, oh, it's okay to do it. But why not have those discussions? Why do we need to, we don't know what, like right now, students are home, right? Kids are home. Even before September, kids were home. I know people who have kids, little ones, who has the time to juggle work, kids, and then get dressed up on the video call.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. Why we need to really understand and be empathetic to what the other person's going through when it comes to Zoom, because Zoom can be this amazing connector, or it can be something that just destroys and just shreds a person's mental health, depending on how and when it's used. And that's really what I would sum up with, is the two things that you brought up, and I agree with them, is, not everything needs to be a Zoom call.
No.
To be picky about what needs to be a Zoom call and what doesn't. And then when you are having a Zoom call, be careful, be respectful of how you conduct it, of understanding the person on the other end. You could be the highlight of their day, or you could be the dread of their day of being another Zoom call, depending on what that person's going through. And it really needs to be taken that individually.
My ending notes and summing up is this is a perfect example of inclusion, including everybody. Everyone's circumstances are different. You don't know what's happening in each employee's life, but to demand it to be a certain way is not, you're not including everybody. So companies that are all right now talking about diversifying and inclusion, this is one way you can incorporate this, is to be mindful of all your employees. Actually ask yourself, do you really need to have a Zoom call? Do people really need to dress up for these Zoom calls? Because let's be real, let's be honest, like just be human. Just be human. Stop thinking it has to be this way in order to be classified as professional, or if someone doesn't look a certain part, that means they're not ready to go to work. Hey, I can be rolling out of bed and I'll be ready to go to work. But you know what I mean? Like last night, just before going to sleep, I had all these thoughts running through. That doesn't mean I'm not working. You can be working. It's about this doesn't need to be dressed up.
Well, and you know what? And we could probably get into a whole conversation about that. But what you're talking about there is one of the reasons why workdays are so long. And it has to do with the fact that in the knowledge economy, we're never really away from work. Our work is always right up here, and we're always, it's always there, having the potential to stress us out. But that's for another day.
That is why we all more stressed out, right? Is this the knowledge-based industry we're in? Like if we're in a labor job, you can clock out and you're gone, right? But if you're in a knowledge-based work environment, you're never clocked out. You're never clocked out because you're always out. Back of your mind, work is somewhere there, already planning for tomorrow.
So it's another conversation for sure that we should have.
So, that's our topic for today. If you felt like, if you're zoomed out, hey, reach out to one of us. Feel free to talk about it. If you need someone to talk about it, feel free to reach out on the phone. You can DM us too. Whatever method works for you. If you need to talk about this, hey, we're here. We can listen. Feel free to reach out to us. I don't want anyone to think that they're in this alone and they can't talk to people. But you can talk to me. You can talk to Gail. Please reach out. Don't just silently deal with things. And if you need help, you know, it is Suicide Prevention Month. Reach out to helplines. I don't know the number by heart, but there's a lot of suicide prevention helpline. If you have suicide thoughts, please reach out to somebody and talk about it. It's much better to talk about it than to take an action and take your life. On that note, we will end it here. We'll be back next week, Thursday, for the next few weeks. So we're just going to be going live once a week, and we'll be back on Thursday at 12:30. Until then, please enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your weekend, enjoy the weather, and we'll be back Thursday. Bye, guys.